Hello, my name is Rob Robinson. It is a pleasure to join you today and a pleasure to have my special guest here, who I'll introduce in a minute. This podcast is a collaboration between Democracy at Work and the Left Forum. It is an ongoing series that you will hear on a regular basis. The Left Forum, as you know, is an annual conference that took place over the years. A little bit of an interruption during the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're bringing it back on track. And the idea is to educate people on our current economic situation. Democracy at Work does the same thing, but focuses a lot on cooperative living, cooperative working spaces, etc. These two organizations are collaborating together with the intention to bring the left and unite the left together. So my special guest today for this particular portion is David Cobb, who I first met at the U.S. Social Forum in 2010 in Detroit, which was interesting. I'd like to see more social forums going. We got a little bit off track with that. David has sued corporate polluters. He's does a Substack called Redneck Gone Green, which is online right now. He was a 2004 Green Party nominee for presidency of the United States. David, welcome to the conversation.
Howdy, Rob. It's good to see you again, brother.
Same here. I could see, we are collaborating. We talked before we actually went on air about the facial hair. And, yesterday, I said, I got to go to the barbershop before we do this podcast because mine was growing out. And when you see yourself in the mirror in the morning, you take a step back, like, okay, I guess either this work is freaking me out or I'm just getting old, one of the two, or maybe both. But anyway, David, I want to talk to you today about Build and Fight, which is a program you're involved in with a comrade of both of ours, Kalia Kuno, who is from Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. And, I've read through the framework for Build and Fight. And one of the things that first struck me right away is organized mutual aid on a communal scale, right? To sort of test the economic shocks that are coming. I think the economic shocks have been here for a while, right? And I think Occupy focused on, if you think about the Occupy movement, they really invested a lot of time in economic injustice in the US. And then I think it carried on for a while. So why now? Why focus on this now?
Well, Rob, thanks for that. And I'm going to take one step back to
Sure.
provide some context. And that is, I think we in the People's Network for Land and Liberation, which are a consortium of local community groups who are adapting the Build and Fight formula, understand not only what is happening, but why. And that is, we are in the beginning stages of a full-blown ecological collapse. And we are in what I would call end stage capitalism, not late stage. This is the end of capitalism as we know it, but don't celebrate that because fascism is replacing it because of automation, robotics, technology, artificial intelligence, everything that the predatory class uses with the means of production that used to require human labor. They don't even need us as much anymore. So we are literally losing our ability to influence or extract concessions from the predatory class. And lastly, fascism is rising in this country and globally objectively because the velvet glove of neoliberalism represented by the Democratic Party is no longer working. The entire system is collapsing before our eyes, and it's been collapsing at a slower rate. But when you ask why now, because everything is escalating, everything is accelerating. We are in a moment. So what we're saying with the Build and Fight is an overall plan to build liberated zones where we can take care of ourselves and our people. Yes, food and housing and art and culture and community production centers. Like, we're talking about building liberated zones where we are not dependent on the predatory class. We're doing it ourselves. But I like that you focused in on food, because without food and land, nothing else is possible.
So on that note, before I drill down a little bit further on that, I, one can be skeptical of whether or not you can bring entire communities and a group of people who aren't who don't understand the world that they live in exactly and were got comfortable in the capitalist model that they've existed in most of their lives. So how do we shift? How do we move to get more people, or as I like to say, expand the circle, right? If you look at that circle of people doing this work, I don't want to say it's a small circle. It is somewhat fractured. So how do you surround a group of people and bring more people into the fold?
So thanks for that very concrete, astute, and challenging question. And I'm going to ask you and your viewers and listeners to imagine, instead of just a two-dimensional circle, imagine a three-dimensional funnel, right? So at the top is the circle of a funnel, of course, right? So what I would say is, yes, expand that circle, and we have to bring more and more people into that. But the funnel going down, we need to expand the funnel as well, which means that those of us who are doing this work have to push ourselves and challenge ourselves. There is no there is no avoiding the need for consciousness and political education. You know, our good friend and comrade Jerome Scott, who we worked with at the U.S. Social Forum, used to always talk about the need for, we have to both do very practical, concrete applications that make people's lives better. And we have to push ourselves and them to understand why we are doing these things and why things are happening to us. So, this is why the Build and Fight includes political education, Rob. And then, so I just wanted to contextualize it. And really important to recognize that our approach for land can only happen where you live, work, play, and pray. I think that the left in the US has spent far too much time trying to gather the leaders, quote unquote, leaders of various movements and constituencies rather than drilling down in our own communities. One of the great benefits of the Occupy movement was, yes, Occupy Wall Street was the epicenter, and you and I spent time at Zuccotti Park. It was a fantastic celebration. But I knew that there was something powerful happening in Occupy when encampments started happening all across the country and indeed across the world. So again, since we're talking about land, land does not exist abstractly. It's literally where your feet touch down. It's where your community is. And I don't mean an online community. This is lovely that we're able to reconnect virtually, but Rob, at the end of the day, your community is in Harlem. My community is in Humboldt County, California. That's where I live, work, play, and pray. That's where the land is, and that's where we have to be.
So let's drill down on land. David, as you know, I work a lot outside of the U.S. I personally believe in internationalism. I've learned from one of the largest social movements in the world, the Landless Workers Movement, or the MST in Brazil. Brazil has a constitution post dictatorship that says land has to serve a social purpose or a social function, right? We have a constitution written 250 years ago in good old boy language that only serves a few, and it serves the oligarchies, right? It says that private rights trump people's rights. So how do we change? I know you've been involved in and organizing to change our constitution here in the US, and it's sort of an uphill battle. So how do we get to this place if we're going to liberate land?
Listen, first, thank you for mentioning that, and thanks for bringing in Brazil, because Brazil and multiple other countries give us a different framework around not only land but also food.
That's right.
And that's why it's important that we think about what is our overall vision. Again, we have to have a theory of change, which you're asking me about, but we also have to do very practical things, right? I often say that theory without practice is mere contemplation. But Rob, practice without a theoretical understanding, that's just randomly doing stuff, right? Like, so the vision that I and we who are advocating the build and fight formula have a vision that guarantees not only food, but housing, art, and culture, like everything that are human needs should be human rights. So it is a not only a human rights framework, but an indigenous worldview that says we're in reciprocal relationship with all of life itself. And to some folks, upon first hearing that, that may sound either idealistic or naive, but I remind people that the only way you can get to a new world is if you have a vision of it to begin with. There was a time 250 years ago that somebody with your pigment was enslaved and had no rights whatsoever in this country,
That's
right?
right.
And so it would have been crazy to imagine that you were a fully vested human with human rights. So, uh, you know, the current U.S. Constitution enshrines property rights, not human rights, and it can't even conceive of the idea of the rights of nature, right? But Rob, several countries, including Brazil, but I'm going to go down this list that enshrine and recognize the access to food as a constitutional right, guaranteed, or even broader, a adequate standard of living for humans. Here's that list: Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, Guyana, Haiti, Kenya, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Nepal, Nicaragua. What I'm telling you is, once again, if we look to the global south, you will see examples of a vision that they are putting into practice. And that's why we insist on explicitly saying we need a post capitalist vision. We need a vision where humans' needs are being met in a very concrete way. And we challenge both capitalism and white supremacy and settler colonialism and heteropatriarchy, and not merely at a conceptual level, but we break it down without dumbing it down.
So thank you. And I want to go back to something you said, practice and theory, because I was mentored by an academic by the name of Neil Smith, a distinguished professor of anthropology and geography at the City University of New York Graduate Center. And that is something he instilled in me 15, 20 years ago, right? Always supported and believed in community and academia collaborating because you need to make change, right? Community has knowledge to share, they're teachers, and so does the academic halls have knowledge, right? But you can learn through exchanges by coming together and exchanging ideas and building something different. So, on this notion, uh, I want to press you a little bit more. How do we get there? Because there are some that believe that we're a selfish society here in the US. We believe in narratives, or a big section of our society believes in narratives that I got mine, David. You go get yours. I worked hard, right? You can always work hard and achieve anything you want in the great old USA. Well, some of us know that's not true, but there is a large section of society that believes in that. So, how do we change those narratives and get people thinking different?
Well, the only way to change a narrative is to tell a new story. Uh, yeah, the quote good news is, Rob, that old narrative of if you just work hard enough, you can extract concessions. That's literally coming to an end because of automation, robotics, technology, artificial intelligence. The objective material world is changing. The reality is, like, I'm 62 years old. I'm an elder. Uh, People in their 50s and younger, y'all are not going to live in the world that I grew up in. It does not exist anymore. So that change is fundamentally happening, whether people like it or not. The second thing is this, and I'm going to take this head on, Rob. I have given up trying to persuade people to think differently. I try to articulate my narrative, how I see the world and what I'm doing, and inspire and entice them to engage with me. Now, if folks want to have genuine principled debate, I will do so. But if people are just dug in and say, convince me otherwise, I say, it's not worth my time or yours. And what I'm finding, Rob, I don't know about you, I'm being inundated with people who want to come and roll with me because of the success that we're having at decommodifying land, at building community land trust, at building worker owned cooperatives. Again, because we're showing, not merely telling. People are watching our success, right? And while the current system is collapsing, like weeds or flowers in a sidewalk, we're growing while everything else is collapsing. So, like, this is my very honest answer to you. When we first met, I did spend a lot of time trying to convince and persuade people to see it my way. I've made an adjustment, Rob, which is I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be principled. I'll debate people who are principally debating me. But at the end of the day, if they've got a different experiment, then have your experiment. Like, but I've got one that I am working. It's like, as a recovering alcoholic, 30 some odd years, we say, work the program. I'm working my program of liberation.
There you go, brother. There you go. So I'm in 100% agreement with you. And I too have learned over a period of time. But I still love to debate. And here's a fundamental debate that you can engage in easy in this country. And I mean people across ethnic backgrounds, economic backgrounds, is about home ownership leading to wealth. As somebody who's formerly homeless, and experience what I call a transformation in life, right? I believed in certain things. Certain things were fed and force fed to me in the first part of my life. And then I experienced the real world. My family experienced the real world. And I make the argument now that home ownership doesn't lead to wealth, it leads to perpetual debt. And trying to, I love that debate because I bring factual evidence of my own family to the argument. Moving from Brooklyn, New York to Long Island, 1962, my parents buying a house for $22,500. And eventually that house had a value, an assessed value of $450,000 so that they could extract taxes from you, right? The taxes on Long Island, where my family's house was, usually goes to the school district. So at the end of their lives, my dad and my brother are living in this house, and I'm having a debate with them. Why do you want to continually possess this house? You're going further and further into debt. And the mentality that they absorbed of those narratives, it was heartbreaking to me, right? Like, you can't let this go. And nobody else in the family wants it. So what are you going deeper into debt for, right? So I guess that goes back to the political education that we were talking about. Yeah, you and I have changed, but I still think we have a battle of trying to, a tug of war, so to speak, to pull people in our direction.
Well,
I'm not going
listen,
to
of
make you
course,
come.
again, that's principled debate and principled struggle is different, right? And so, like, look, let's just break it down this way, right? Like, I was born in 1962. I just looked it up. In 1962, in the United States, the average home cost $18,200.
Wow.
Right? Now, let's even adjust that for the inflation rate that existed. So, from 1962 to 2025, the inflation adjusted cost of a home, of a full 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, would have been $189,000. Now, do the math on that, like what it would have cost. So, there was a time for your my generation and older, where home ownership was in fact a way to build wealth.
Was it wealth, David, or was it some security? I don't
Well, it was
believe that it ever
security, but
built
that's how you
wealth.
would call wealth, right? Look,
Right.
the
That's
reality
right.
is I was born in poverty. I know what it's like to carry a 5-gallon bucket of my family's excrement and empty it in a hole in the ground at the end of the day. So,
I
like
hear you.
you, I came out of a certain cultural and socioeconomic background.
That's right.
Uh, and I know, like, the first house that I bought was $75,000. I sold that for $185,000, and then I bought another house, and it's gone up 3 times in wealth, like actual money. But again, I just don't think that's possible for anyone
It's not
anymore.
feasible today. It's just
Right?
not.
It's just not feasible. And then here's the other thing: I want to take this opportunity, Rob, to make a distinction but between socioeconomic class and ownership class.
Okay.
Because as a leftist, Absolutely, socioeconomics matter, right? That's how much income you're generating, either as a family or as an individual. That is 100% uh, in like as an individual matters. But even for somebody making $100,000 a year, if you were working for somebody else and you don't own the means of production, you're still working class because you're having to sell your labor to somebody else. This
That's
is
right.
why owning the means of production, which are the factories and the tools and the ranches and the farmland, like whatever it takes to actually produce the things that we need, or even for the things that we sell. Like, this is why it's so important to have a class analysis that goes beyond socioeconomics and understands a predatory class that actually does not work. They are
That's right.
capitalists because they own capital. That's it. They're not actually producing a damn thing.
Right. And that's what we have to understand as a society, our role in that. And once you learn that, you back away. At least I did, after I became educated and started understanding. Like, okay, I'm not trying to work and make the 1% rich, right? I'm trying to find a way that humanity can rise up, right? And we can share. And I think that's, again, I'm back, and I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I think that's a big part of the challenge, because I believe that these narratives, without that class analysis, it's ingrained in some people
Listen,
that.
it is ingrained because that's the cultural narrative that's told, but
That's right.
that cultural narrative is a lie, just as much as
Absolutely.
it was a
Absolutely.
lie that somebody with your pigment was subhuman and inferior, right? Like,
Right.
we have to
That's right.
understand that the narrative that you're talking about that's ingrained has got to be challenged. And here's an easy way to challenge it, and it goes like this: human beings as Homo sapiens have been on this planet somewhere between 300 and 500,000 years. Like, there's no doubt. That's the objective scientific knowledge that anthropologists, biologists will tell you. Here's something interesting: for 95% of the time that we were on planet Earth, humans cooperated, we shared with one another, and to the extent that anything was produced, it was shared, and it was instead of a commodity that bought and paid for a profit, was literally just, it was called use value. The economists call that use value. You hunted, or even when farming began, it was for use. It was for human need and use. Rob, what I'm getting at is that at the like capitalism actually didn't just spring from nothing. So for 95% of our times we were cooperators, right? The enclosure movement, empire, enclosing land, cutting ourselves off from others, that was different, right? That's very new. It is actually not human nature. And then capitalism morphs into feudalism, which morphs into nationalism and industrialism, and then capitalism, which is only about 150 years old as capitalism itself. Now, the enslavement of others, empire, that's the reason we have to break out of the us versus them mentality that is at the core of both empire and fascism and capitalism. We have to embrace the who is the we. And I'll end it with this: I do not believe that humans are fundamentally angelic, but nor do I believe that human beings are fundamentally demonic. I think that all of us basically do what our society and culture incentivizes us to do. And the problem is that the political, economic, and legal system is incentivizing extraction,
That's right.
oppression, power over domination. And that's not natural for humans.
So this is incredible. I really appreciate your perspective. I, as far as the Constitution, which I touched on a little bit, I'm blessed to give a lot of lectures at law schools. And one of the things I talked about, you mentioned earlier, right? People with my pigmentation were considered three-fifths of a man when that document was founded, right? You weren't considered a human. So I start out my lectures always with the same line. We the people. Who were those people? Because people that looked like me weren't considered a human,
Listen, and
right?
in fact, people that looked like me were, but my people would not have been, because we have to understand when that document and those hallowed words, we the people, it was about 5% of the humans on on that portion of Turtle Island or continent that burnt
Okay.
those 13 colonies. And by the way, let's be very clear. That meant the original inhabitants, the indigenous people, they were not legally persons with rights. Enslaved Africans were not persons with rights. Women were not persons with rights. And most white men were not persons with rights, because only white men who owned property
That's
had
right.
rights. So
That's
this
right.
is why I say we have to understand that white supremacy is real, but it's not enough to understand the nature of this system. And it's how they've divided us, Rob. The one thing that the predatory class fears the most is when somebody who looks like you and somebody who looks like me start to recognize our shared humanity and that
Hmm.
our collective liberation is actually tied up in one another. That's what scares the hell out of them.
So, David, this has been an engaging conversation. I'm going to stop right there because I want this to pick up down the line. And we'll talk more in the coming weeks producing this podcast. But I really appreciate re engaging with you and having these types of conversations. My wish is that we come together, that build and fight can be something that can be distributed across this country, because as long as you've known me, and I think anybody who knows me, I bang desk for popular and political education, because it's been the fundamental uplifting and the the transformation of Robinson, so to speak, from my trips to the global South and learning from places like Brazil and all of these countries in Latin America. It's institutionalized down there, right? It's part of everyday life. Our education system is failing us right now because we don't bring a lot of truth to our educational system, and we push aside a lot of the real history and infuse it with a lot of fake language. So, thank you for taking the time to be with us. I don't know if you have any closing comments for this show, but
Well,
we'll
uh, I want
reconnect
to
in the
say,
future.
Rob, thank you for reaching out to me. Really excited to know that you've got a new program that you're developing. I'm very excited about the Democracy at Work and Left Forum collaboration. I hope that the Left Forum returns. If so, I promise you I will connect with you there. I also want to invite your listeners and viewers to cross pollinate with me on Redneck Gone Green, which is a weekly show that I'm doing on the Democracy at Work platform, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Just go to the Democracy at Work YouTube channel and you'll be able to find me. The other thing that I want to close with is an invitation for this May 2 through 5, Atlanta, Georgia. We're basically doing a smaller version of the US Social Forum, only we're calling it Resist and Build. You can tell the influenced by the build and fight formula, right? So resist the harm, build the new. And I will invite folks to check it out at conveniently titled resistandbuild.net. We'd love to have folks come. There's going to be a carnival beyond capitalism. There's going to be public workshops. There's going to be skill sharing and cross pollination and working together. So, Rob, I'd love to see you and reconnect with you in person there if you can make it. But I'd also tell your listeners and viewers, if you can get down to Atlanta May 2 through 5, come on down and be with us, y'all.
I'll do my best to be there, and I will let you know we're working on a 1 day conference with Left Forum coming up in the fall. More details to follow. Dave, once again, thank you for taking the time to do this. It's great to reconnect and share our thoughts and exchange ideas, and to be honest, transparent, and really share with the world what we see and how things have transformed over a period of time, right? And understanding where you were then, because we aren't too different in age. I was born in '56, so the same things that you're talking about. Yeah, the world is different, man. The next ride, yo, is going to be a lot different than it is right now. So,
That's a fact. Peace, y'all.
peace in the Middle East, brother.